Will, sorry.
Oh, just to kind of add to what you're saying, I've found that a lot of times the people that come up with certain ideas or ideologies don't do it for the sake of profit and so forth, but then the forces that get behind those ideas and promote them are those forces who are doing it for the sake of profit. So even like Milton Friedman, for example, who was kind of the founder of free market economics as we've known it in this last half century of the Chicago School, where came up with all the reforms that were made in Chile and things like that when Pinochet was in power, and in a lot of other places, China as well. You know, he's a professor at the University of Chicago, and he's making his money. He's got tenure, and it doesn't really he doesn't like make a ton of money by the fact that this ideology is broadly accepted throughout the world. But then again, different forces come and latch onto those ideologies or those ideas and promote them for the sake of making money. Same thing with the people who maybe wanted to initially invade Iraq, like say, you know, you've got think tanks in Washington, Heritage Foundation or whatever, Project for the New American Century, or all these different things. They put out these ideas like, hey, we should invade Iraq for this and this reason. But then, of course, arms industry, different companies, et cetera, they then have their lobbyists that then promote those ideas because they're going to make money on it, and eventually it just, you know, gains some steam. Whereas ideas that don't serve the capitalist class are still out there in U.S. society, and they exist, but they don't get any promotion or marketing or backing, and so they just remain obscure and no one really knows about it.
Yeah, I mean, and it's good that you bring up Iraq. A really, in my position, a really stupid leftist critique is this. The only reason we went into Iraq was for the oil, right? You hear this all the time, and that's really stupid. No, as a matter of fact, if most of these neocons genuinely believe in the values they're espousing, they believe, you know, that the human rights in Iraq were terrible, which they, you know, relative to Western, you know, democracies, they were, right? That Saddam Hussein was a bad guy, he was. But the problem is this ideological function blocks what is really going to happen. I mean, if I may, off subject for a moment, there's a very brilliant American philosopher, Donald Rumsfeld, who said a very profound thing. He said, look, there are known knowns, which are things that we know. There are known unknowns, which are things we know that we don't know. And there are unknown unknowns, which are things that we don't know we know. Or we don't know that we don't know, right? This is unknown unknowns. But you'll notice this is a box. And one of the boxes is missing. And the box that is missing are unknown knowns. Things we don't know that we know. When the United States invades countries, right, it turns into bloody guerrilla warfare, protracted over years, with political instability, with people profiteering off of it. We know this. Every time we go to war, we get this. But we don't know it. We don't know that we know it, right? And so this is the functioning of ideology at play under capitalism. And like you said, it's a very stupid thing to think all these people are disingenuous and lying to us when they say they care about human rights. The only problem is they don't know what they know, right? Maybe, oh yeah, sorry.
This is going back to an earlier comment, and I may be off the mark here, but how does a prison generate capital?
That's a very good question. Actually, so when you have a public prison, right, you have taxpayers paying for it. But when you have a private prison, you have investors or an owner, right, who gets paid usually, not always, usually they get paid per prisoner. So the state says, look, private industry, somehow, it's usually not really specified, private industry runs prisons better than the government does. So what we're going to do is we're going to give you this amount of money, and you need to run the prison for each prisoner for this amount of money. So, you know, like $6,000 a year. So each prisoner, they get $6,000 a year. Well, of course, how would you generate profit on that? Don't use $6,000 a year, right? And to be fair, right, this is the joy of the market system. In principle, a prison could go bankrupt. right? If they spend $7,000 a year or $9,000 or whatever. But again, something funny happens. One is they're given $6,000. Well, and actually, sometimes they're given profit. I forget the exact term. You might want to check out Naomi Klein's shock doctrine. She talks about that in there. You get a guaranteed profit. Halliburton in Iraq got a guaranteed profit, which is, look, this is a really dangerous activity. Your private company will pay cost plus 5%. So we'll pay all your costs, and then we'll pay 5% in addition, right? But if you buy things from yourself, which happens a lot under, capitalism, and you buy them for a very expensive price, you can generate a lot of profit, right? This is how Medicare gets so bloated in Medicaid. And prisons, right? If you have a prison system which is profit plus, what is a really good idea, right? And this should sound really familiar. You have your prisoners make jumpsuits and clothing, and then you have them sell it to you at cost. And then you sell it to the prison for a huge markup, right? And this happens. This happens all the time in America. And why? Because they're private prisons. And what's the purpose of a business? To generate surplus value. And so that would be how a prison makes money.
I guess I was thinking more of a state prison systems and.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's very difficult for a state prison system to make money, and when they do make money, it's usually from corruption. And in principle, usually when a warden or someone is making money off a prison, even if they don't get caught, they're usually breaking the law. And so that's an important distinction. Whereas if a warden is making money off a private prison, he's just a very good entrepreneur.
Okay.
One more.
Yeah, I mean, it's just worth pointing out a very concrete example of that is a judge that just recently got busted in Pennsylvania for throwing juveniles into facilities for just outrageously petty crimes like arguing with their parents and stuff. The reason that this is also because they do get paid by the bed, right? And of course they make more money because they cut down on these costs and such by getting more prisoners. So all you need to do is talk, a little background thing. It's you talk to your buddy and you're like, hey, can you put more kids in prison? I'll give you a cutback, and he literally did. So
yeah,
it's not always that villainous, but that's just a concrete example.
Okay, well, let's grab a hand for his efforts.